Hello, I'm Chandler Klebs, and I'm here with Poffo Ortiz again, and we're doing another hangout, and we're not sure what all is going to happen in this hangout, but we have a plan. Poffo has this project he's been working on for a long time about categorizing these common carnist responses, these reactionary things that people they've heard other people say them, or they just say something to distract us from the real issue. And so, Pafa, you sent me that file with that list of each of these common responses, and I also saw it previously in that Facebook post. And most of them, just by reading them, I can tell they're ridiculous and why they're ridiculous. And I think a lot of vegans will know that these things are wrong, but then, like you said, they waste their time responding to these and trying to point out factually why this isn't true. Like, you don't, like the protein myth. You don't protein doesn't come from animal parts. It comes from plants, and it comes from the dirt, really, when you think
There,
about it.
there's so much that could be said about this. I mean, there's so much explanation and exposition I could give into why I'm doing this, or how taxing and tiring it is, having to address all of these these defense mechanisms and excuses. But what I wanted to do today was really just get into what they are, and we've all heard these like a million times, and I literally hear them like 100 times a day. And just in brief, the best way I could just explain it is that I don't think that it is fruitful or productive to continuously have to explain things that are obvious and repeat ourselves again and again and again, because we're not actually answering their questions. We're not actually educating them. We're just reacting to their reactions. Like, all these things are just like sort of reflexive reactions that they have when confronted with animal cruelty, or maybe the obligation to go vegan. And so it's just a response. It's not a well thought out argument. None of them are real arguments. A lot of them are myths. This is true that many people actually believe this stuff, but most of them are just responses because they're just trying to get you kind of off their back. They're just trying to divert the attention, derail the conversation, um, you know, trying to basically take a counter jab at you. And so my whole thing is, why do we spend so much time um, giving sort of pre-programmed responses to these pre-programmed responses, you know? And if from our end, I mean, it's because we have all this information, all this knowledge, so we end up just explaining about the fact that plants don't have brains or central nervous systems, so they have no nerve endings, so they can't feel pain, things like that. I mean, people already know this stuff. You learn this stuff in biology in elementary school. So it's just a waste of time to continuously explain and have to have to give rebuttals and try to deconstruct these arguments when the arguments themselves are all logical fallacies. They're logical fallacies. They're cognitive distortions. They're rationalizations, justifications. They're cultural myths. They're misconceptions and misinformation. Basically, they're just diversion tactics, like excuses. So you don't you don't counter an excuse with a bunch of factual information, because the person isn't really looking for that factual information. They're just um, they're just trying to evade responsibility, and kind of break up the cognitive dissonance. They're feeling uncomfortable and they're feeling at ease because you're putting them on the spot. You're as a vegan activist, when we do outreach, when we do online activism, we automatically are in a position of sort of righteous authority. Even though we don't present ourselves like that, they see us like that. They see us as like this this morally superior person that's acting sanctimonious and trying to call them out, basically like accusing them of something, attacking them. Like, so
Yeah.
they're just defending themselves, basically. So what I'm saying is, let's get to the core of why they're saying this stuff. But first and foremost, let's classify what these things are, because they all fall under those categories of logical fallacies and evasion tactics, and defense mechanisms. So
Yeah.
if you want to do it,
So
let's get on the list.
yeah, sure. Are you going to read what they are from your file that you have open?
Yeah, yeah. And I would just say keep the Wikipedia page open. We also have a Wikipedia page open that has all the list of logical fallacies. So vegans are too pushy. How many times have we heard that, right? My friend George Martin classified that as an ad hominem. He's basically, they're attacking the messenger rather than the message. They're just trying to deflect and say, I don't like the way you're talking to me, blah blah blah. So that's a way for them to just not have to deal with the issue at all. Basically, is by like counterattacking your character, your personality. That's an ad hominem.
Yeah.
I don't like your approach. It's in the same vein. That's an ad hominem. It's just a personal attack saying, says nothing about animal cruelty or animal exploitation. It's just a way to kind of put the walls of defense up. That's all these things are, just walls. They're just putting up walls and saying, you know, well, I don't like you, so I don't have to listen to your message, or you've disqualified yourself as an authority to speak to me about this um, because I don't like your tone. That's all it is. Stop shoving your opinions down my throat. That's I would say that that goes back to something deeper of, they don't understand that these aren't our opinions. These are like facts. These are literal facts, that this isn't a diet that we're trying to promote. We're not trying to convert everyone to a certain diet. We're trying to expose animal exploitation and abuse and violence and cruelty and this archaic,
Yeah, they
you know,
mistakenly think that it's about us. That
right.
it's an
All
opinion
they
or
see
this
is
is our
us.
personal thing. And additionally, here's another thing that I'd like to point out for people who misunderstand veganism. We are not making money off of this. It doesn't benefit us financially or any other way for people to go vegan or not. This is entirely about the animals. And if people think it's us and our opinions, they've got it all wrong.
So, how would you classify that? I mean, stop shoving your opinions down with. That's a misunderstanding of the message. So, I would say they need to first understand what veganism is. In that case, like definition of veganism.
Yeah, that's mostly just a misunderstanding entirely. I'm not even sure if it can be categorized as a fallacy or not.
Right. It's a misunderstanding of the philosophy of veganism itself. That it's not your just personal diet choice that you're trying to impose on them. It's like if you walk down the street and say, hey, there's a woman being raped over here. There's a child being beaten over here. Um, can you please do something to help me stop it? Or what you're doing, sort of like, around the corner on the other side, is actually harming this person. You don't see it, but I see it. And they're going to say, stop shoving your opinions down my throat. And we're like, no, we're trying to tell you that there's a victim involved, and your lifestyle is creating victims, and we're speaking up for the victims. This has nothing to do with personal choice and all this other stuff. So yeah, anyway, we could spend forever talking about each of these. So
Oh yeah.
I respect your lifestyle, so you should respect mine. Same kind of thing. Their focus is all wrong, and this is called a thought terminating cliche. Um, like, again, George Martin has this incredible website that covers all this stuff. It's Carnism Debunked. I'm gonna pull it up right now. And he has all the lists, a lot of the fallacies. This huge list explaining all this stuff, arguments. So let me read. Thought terminating. It's using words or phrases that discourage critical thought and meaningful discussion about a given topic in order to end the argument and move on, as a way of combating cognitive dissonance. Like, an example is, okay, you don't want to eat meat, but others do. That's a personal choice. Just live and let live. See, it's basically
It's the let live. I gotta say, it's the let live aspect that they're missing.
Oh yeah. Where it's not live and let live, because you're not letting others live. You're not letting billions of animals live. Yeah, you're not thinking. Again, if the focus is wrong, I would say that the core of this is that the focus is all wrong, but it's a way to shut down the conversation. And so I hate this phrase. Let's just agree to disagree. That's the the core of it right there. Is let's just agree to disagree, and that it just doesn't address the issue. It's just like saying, they're looking at you. They think that you are just trying to change them when it comes to what they eat, and they're missing the backstory here. The backstory is billions of animals suffering and being, boiled alive and being mutilated and being tortured. That's the point. So we got to bring it back to, no, animals are being tortured. This is unnecessary. Like this isn't about, you respecting my lifestyle, me respecting your lifestyle. We're trying to tell you there's an atrocity occurring. There are horrific things happening, and we're trying to raise your awareness about it. You see what I'm saying? So shift the focus. But where do you get your protein? So that possibly comes from, it's probably the number one excuses or sort of diversion tactics that we hear. But I do believe it comes from the cultural myth of thinking that we can only derive our proteins from animal products, from animal flesh. So it's a red herring. It's a counter argument, but it in that case, it's either they've heard the rumor that you have, that you have to get the sort of the cultural consensus is that you have to get your protein from animal products. So they've heard that all their lives. So they're just regurgitating, just repeating what they've heard. And it's a red herring. It's a way to kind of deter from the conversation. But I would say in that case, that myth just needs to be dismantled. There needs to be education. You just need to explain to them all vegetation, all plants, all fruits and vegetables contain protein, and we don't have protein deficiencies. We have an overconsumption of protein. We have a problem with people getting too much protein. It's leading to all these debilitating diseases. So
yeah, and
that's
what's
one
interesting is in some cases it may be a red herring, but a lot of times it's just that people legitimately believe that they have to eat animals to get their protein. So it's an honest question in some cases.
Right. So it's a myth that just needs to be debunked through education. Being vegan is too expensive. That's another myth, but it's an appeal to poverty. Appeal to poverty. Let's see if I can find it.
Cool. I'm gonna see if
supporting a conclusion because an arguer of it is financially poor. Example: my friend lives in a food desert and says it's too hard to be vegan. It's easy for you to say that veganism is easy when you're so privileged. I'll trust my friend over your white privileged piece of shit ass. that's his description, or his example of it. So it's supporting a conclusion because an arguer is financially poor. It's like saying, yeah, it's self-explanatory basically. It's like, I can't afford it, so that negates what you're saying. And that just, again, beyond that one just being a myth, I think that's more of an excuse. I think that's definitely more of an excuse. It's more of a way to, because okay, and this is what we have to kind of determine on the spot when we're talking to people. Where are they coming from? Where is that coming from? Is it they just don't want to give up fried chicken? They just don't want to give up ribs. They just like their steak too much. They just don't want to give up their burgers and sausage and meat, and so they're just repeating again, like a rumor that they've heard that vegan food is expensive. But we know that it's completely not, and we'll sit there forever and explain and say, no, the cheapest foods on earth, rice and beans and corn and peas and potatoes, these things are vegan. The whole produce department in your grocery store is vegan. So it's the cheapest foods on earth. If you're thinking that it's too expensive, it's because you're imagining the meat alternatives and the plant-based the plant-based foods that have come out now that are mimicking the traditional foods that we eat in a Western diet. So that just needs to be explained. But again, I don't think we should spend too much time explaining that. I think they're just saying that to get you off their back. You know what I'm trying to say? So it's an appeal to poverty. It falls apart. It doesn't exist because it's not factual, first of all. And then I would say we need to circumnavigate why they're saying that and get to the core of why they're just throwing out this excuse. Because so an example of this would be like, you should say, yeah, I'm sure you've heard that, and that's probably that's kind of a popular myth that's going around right now, but that's not true, and I can prove it to you very simply. Here you go. But let's get to the core of it. I mean, are you really worried about you're wearing a nice, coat, you're dressed really well, you seem well off. Are you really concerned about the cost? I mean, like what do you eat in a day? If you break it down, we know that meat, eggs, and dairy is much more expensive. Like what I'm trying to say is get to the heart of it and be like, you're not really worried about cost, are you? Like that, you're just saying that because that's what you've heard, because you're trying to um you're trying to get out of this. Basically, you're trying to evade responsibility for going vegan. That's the point. As I'm saying, we should get around that instead of
Yeah.
spending 20 minutes explaining the obvious.
Yeah, and well, and another thing, I think we can go a little bit beyond that. Now, first, we know it's not true because we know that
Mhm.
all the cheapest foods are, these are like the beans, the grains, the fruits and vegetables. They're so much cheaper. If you were to compare the price by the pound, we know that they're far cheaper than meat is.
Mhm. Yeah.
But here's the thing about it. Supposing it was true that it was more expensive to be vegan, does that justify what is
I
being done
was
to those animals as a
I knew
result?
I knew where you were going with it. The ethical concern, the ethical issue is what it needs to be brought back to. Again, you're exactly right. We got to get past that bullshit and say we're talking about unnecessary harm and cruelty. Okay, these animals are just like your dogs and cats and the animals that you love, and just like a horse or any of the animals you see on TV on Animal Planet. Like, we're just talking about other animals that in our society have traditionally been disregarded. We're trying to help people connect the dots here. Like like in light of horrific violence and cruelty, what you're saying is irrelevant, and it would be irrelevant to you if it was going on right in front of you. If you were watching it take place right in front of you, if you were at a slaughterhouse, if you someone was doing what you're paying them to do right in front of your face, this bullshit about, oh, it's too expensive, it's not, that would go out the window. You would step up and you would try and stop it, or you would be appalled. It would. So yeah, bring it back. This is what was so great about AV. You can just point to the footage and be like, if you know this is going on, is this really your main concern? How much money do you actually spend on bullshit and entertainment? And this is just a simple, a simple choice at the grocery store between rice milk, almond milk, and cow's milk. Like, you're just making a very easy transition there, and in most ways
Yeah,
it's pretty easy. So
and
bring it
it's
back to
very
the ethical.
interesting.
I agree.
Yeah, it's very interesting because, yeah, first of all, there's the whole ethical thing makes it irrelevant anyway. But then there's an additional thing that bothers me is the fact that um, meat and dairy and stuff like is subsidized by the government using our taxes, and that's something else I
Oh yeah,
found out.
yeah.
The problem with that is even though it may seem like that dollar meal or whatever at McDonald's may seem cheap, but because it seems like a lot of food for the money price. The problem is that is unethical. Even if it wasn't unethical, what's being done to the animals, it's unethical to force us to be paying for it. I mean, it's
Yeah.
wrong that the government subsidizes it and that takes money from us who are ethically against it. So they are additionally violating us as well as the animals.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many angles to how unethical and immoral it is, animal agriculture. How it's hurting us, it's hurting the animals, it's hurting the environment on every level. It's just an abomination. It's a blight against humanity. The
Yeah.
next one may be a little bit difficult, but let's see. I have Crohn's disease, so I have to eat meat. Now, Crohn's disease is basically like irritable bowel syndrome. You have like inflammation of the lining of the intestinal tract, and you have all these terrible symptoms. Yeah, diarrhea, abdominal pain, fatigue, malnutrition. Like, you end up like it's a terrible disease. But in this case, um, what would eating the most difficult foods to digest, the most difficult products to digest, how would that help in any way? Like, meat is acidic, dairy is acidic. It creates mucus buildup, a buildup. It has an inflammatory reaction in your body. Like meat, eggs, and dairy are the most difficult thing to digest, and it in no way would help or eliminate your symptoms. Like the easiest thing to process, to metabolize, to digest is fruits and vegetables. Some people maybe certain fruits, maybe certain fibers in the vegetation might be difficult to digest, but there's no way that meat, eggs, and dairy is easier to digest than what you would eat on a vegan diet. So that's the myth right there. And once again, I've been in these situations enough to know they don't really have IBS. They don't really have Crohn's disease. They don't really have the diseases. They have a friend who has that disease, or they had gas or some stomach pains a month ago, and they're just throwing that out there to just like, I swear this is what's happening. They're throwing that out there to just get you off their back because they're trying to appeal to appeal to a there's probably a fallacy somewhere. Appeal to a real disease, right? And then you'll say, oh, whoa, I'm sorry. Let me back off. I'll stop what I'm saying right now because you just raised, a counter argument, a counterpoint that I can't, I have no response to because that's a real disease. I'm going to take that seriously. Well, really, honestly, do they really have irritable bowel, disease, Crohn's disease? And if they do, like, what doctor in their right mind would recommend eating a high protein, high fat diet with lots of dairy and meat products? It makes no sense. Like we know that cancer patients would go on the Gerson program, which is even the vegetables have to be boiled a little bit, but it's wiping out all sugars, all meat. It's juicing every day, and it's basically a vegan diet. It's literally just eating the most easily digestible foods to give your body a break so that you can kind of kickstart your immune system with all the juicing and the vitamin C and all the the phytonutrients and stuff. But so this is just a little bit of explanation. If you know a little bit about nutrition, you can dismantle it. But I don't think that most people who say they have Crohn's disease really do. I just think they're using that as an excuse because it seems severe. You know what I mean? It seems serious.
Yeah, and the thing, what's interesting about this is that's one I haven't heard before. I've never heard of Crohn's disease in my life.
Really? Yeah, I hear it all the time. Yeah.
Yeah, that's of course you are talking to more people than I am.
Mm-hmm.
But what I heard, and this is probably also in your list, is that if you have celiac disease, that you can't go vegan. And I've heard that one too, which of course we know is false. But
yeah. Well, we're gonna get to that. That's another one. Can't have gluten, and you have gluten allergy and all that. And how many people really have a true gluten allergy, or is it just a trendy thing to have that disease? And then obviously it's a go-to argument to use, to refute as a refutation to going vegan. So yeah, a lot of these are just excuses, or just people just talking out of their ass, like literally. I can never go vegan. It's part of my culture and family tradition to eat meat. That's an appeal to tradition, obviously. It's an appeal to tradition, and we'll sit there and we'll go on and on and on. Just because something has always been done this way doesn't mean it's right. It's not morally defensible. It's not morally justifiable, because we've been raping and pillaging and killing people for thousands of years. We've been doing all kinds of horrible things. We've been enslaving people. We say all this, but do we really need to say all this stuff? Or are they just making an appeal to tradition so that they don't have to be accountable? Just saying, well, everybody else does it. An appeal to majority is another logical fallacy. Well, everybody else does it.
It's interesting because the problem with that is that we can do that with anything. I mean, we could take them and slam their head into a brick wall and say, well, it's my tradition, it's my culture to slam people's heads into brick walls. It's like, and they wouldn't like it and they wouldn't accept that. So they really are just talking.
The only problem is that's not a widely held tradition. Maybe in some cultures, I don't know, but they are. It is. It's misleading, and it is. It's difficult because we have been eating meat for thousands of years, because animals have been used and exploited and abused and consumed for hundreds of thousands of years. So it's true. So it's not a myth, but it's disregarding modern ethics and morality. It's disregarding your own value system or the progress that we've made as a culture. So much of this goes back to the fact that we're disregarding the progress we've made as a civilized society. It's a throwback to an earlier time period.
And here's what it may be too, because people, when they talk about their culture, their tradition, that it's done this way, here's what I think is really going on in their minds why they say this, is they are afraid that if they no longer follow what their family is doing, what all their neighbors are doing, then they'll come under criticism and be ostracized. So really what's happening there is they're afraid of yeah, and so they care more about their reputation than they do the animals.
I do want to say, yeah, it just made me realize, I do want to say this could be an authentic argument. It's difficult for them because of their environment, because they're surrounded by a lot of meat eaters. They're surrounded by carnists and non-vegans, and it is very difficult. So it just depends on the person. It depends on how they're saying it. If they give an explanation, they're like, yeah, it's just I come from a Hispanic background and my whole family eats meat, and it's just difficult. It's just difficult to even get access to it because of where I live, to get access to a lot of fruits and vegetables, because if they're younger maybe and their parents are just buying the same meat and cheese and bread, like, so there is something you have to take into account, their environment and their family and culture. It's true. But some people will just say it sort of like, we've been doing it for thousands of years. This is you're up against, I heard it yesterday, it's like you're contesting something that 99% of the population does. And I'm like, it's not 99%, but yeah, I get your point, is that we're in the minority. That's the majority are people who don't see anything wrong with this. So that's what we're up against, is basically the more people that do something, the less wrong it appears. Like it's an appeal to majority as well.
Yeah. And that's a very interesting one. Of course, I could go off on a speech about that forever, but I guess we better move on.
Yeah. We're not going to be able to get through all these if we do, because there's so much to be said for each one, because they're so frustrating, and then we hear it so much and we have so much to say. But that's the point. I'm trying to cut down on what we say. I'm trying to classify and label these things so that in the vegan activist's mind, it's already dismantled. They know that they don't need to take the bait, so to speak, and follow that train of thought, because the person is just using these excuses as a way of evading responsibility. Oh, who hasn't heard this? What if you're on a desert island and there's no food except some pigs? You're trapped on a desert island. Okay, there's nothing to eat except some animals. Would you eat an animal then? They're trying to catch
let me handle this one, man. I already have a response for this.
Yeah.
There's no such thing as an island with only pigs. What are those pigs eating? If those pigs are on the island, they are eating something to stay alive. Find what that is and eat that.
So this is an appeal to hypothetical fallacy. Is you're creating an obscure, absurd scenario that'll never happen, trying to pigeonhole the person, trying to kind of force their hand into doing what you do as a meat eater, into doing what you do to justify it. So it's like saying you believe in nonviolence. Well, what if I had a gun against your head and I was threatening to rape your mom? Then you'd be violent. And I'm like, is that happening right now? No. Like, and to argue that point, just say in self-defense is the only excuse, is the only justification for violence. So, but anyway, they're just trying to trap you in a hypothetical scenario. So you can just call it out and say, that's a hypothetical. It's not gonna happen anytime soon.
Exactly. And that's the thing about not to get trapped in hypotheticals, because people are coming up with situations which can't happen most of the time. They're coming with something not just as unlikely, but they come up with hypotheticals that can't happen. Like that example of the island and the pigs.
I mean, if you're not on a desert island, if you're not an Eskimo, I mean, we're gonna cover all these too. If you're not an Eskimo, if you're not a Native American, if you're not living at the turn of the century, if you're not a fucking caveman, if you're not living in the Paleolithic era, then why are you appealing to these things? Like, I'm speaking to you, a modern, person in Western society who has access to an abundance of fruits and vegetables, who has the internet and all this knowledge at your fingertips. Like, there's no excuse. There's really no excuse. So again, we will go on and on and on explaining this stuff, but I'm saying, let's just call them on the bullshit. Let's just say, you know what? I'm not going to answer that, because you're smart enough to know that that's an unrealistic situation. let's get to the real reason why you're trying to come up with these excuses. I mean, in a very nice way, you can try to do that. You can try to bypass, their BS. Let's move on. If we don't kill them, animals will breed, multiply, and overrun the world. That's a slippery slope fallacy. It could also be another, another hypothetical fallacy, but it's slippery slope. Basically, it's like saying you're playing out a scenario that you don't know what the specific consequences are going to be, but you're using the imagined consequences as justification for what you're doing right now in a real situation. Follow me?
Well, and there's another thing about that too, is that if somebody tries to accept that as a valid excuse, then it means that we better kill humans because humans have overpopulated and are destroying the planet. Therefore, if that's your excuse for killing animals, then okay, you can kill your animals, but you also have to kill the humans as well because they're overpopulating. It's like, so there's a problem there.
Let me read the actual definition that George Martin gave. The slippery slope fallacy is assuming that just because one change is made, an extreme chain of events will follow, completely ignoring any middle ground. It's taking it to the extreme. It's like, well, if I do this, then this and this and this and this is going to happen, and because I don't want this end result, I can't do this over here. So it's just it's letting your imagination go wild, go to the extreme, and using that imagined scenario as somehow moral justification for what you do or don't do now.
Yeah, and even though a slippery slope situation can be true sometimes, you have to have an actual reason why this thing leads to this other thing. You have to have that actually explained. Otherwise, it's invalid.
Yeah, a logical, realistic causal chain of events that lead to that.
Yeah.
Oh, I skipped one here, but I guess we already kind of started to explore it a little bit. I have a gluten allergy. If I don't eat meat, I won't have anything else to eat. I've literally heard this said to me. Peter Boghossian said this to me. I have celiac. I have a gluten allergy. No, he said he had Crohn's disease. Then he said he had a gluten allergy. See, what does he really have? I don't know. But he loves bacon. He loves to eat bacon every morning, feed his kids bacon. And I was just like, you're saying this to me. You're such a smart man. You're so intelligent. He invented street epistemology. I don't know. It's a hasty generalization. It's like saying, well, if I stop eating meat, I'm gonna die of protein deficiency. If I don't drink milk, my bones are gonna break and fall apart because I need calcium. And it's based on myth. It's based on cultural myth that we need these things for protein and calcium. But it's also a hasty generalization. You're just generalizing the situation and saying, well, this is definitely going to happen if I do this. But I would say let's sort of deconstruct the fact that it's a myth and even go beyond that and say, are you really worried about this, or do you just not want to give up meat?
Yeah, here's another thing.
Get real with them.
I mean, yeah, because obviously we know that gluten is a thing that's only exists in certain grains, but doesn't exist in all these fruits and vegetables and all this, so many things. They still have so many options. But here's another thing that I'm wondering. What happens if they eat meat of animals that had consumed gluten?
It's not exactly the same thing. It's not exactly. I mean, you're really asking the question. It's not exactly the same thing because it's not the same substance, not the same biomaterial. But it's the idea that the grains. I mean, we can look it up, and other people can probably comment on this more. But it has to do with they had that joke when they went around. They asked everybody what gluten was, and nobody knew. They're like, oh, I try to avoid gluten, but nobody knew what the hell it actually was. It's a molecule that's found in bread. Let's see. What is gluten? It's a general name for the proteins found in wheat, wheat berries, durum, emers, Somalia spelt. It's and barley. It's a composite of storage proteins termed prolamins and glutenins, and stored with starch in cereal grains, barley, rye, oat, and selected species of hybrid products. So it's found in bread. It's found in a lot of stuff, but people have an allergic reaction to it. Like some people have this genetic predisposition, and they'll have all these side effects, and they'll get sick, and I believe it causes a kind of an inflammatory reaction. Celiac disease is the technical term, but being gluten free, I know vegans who have gluten allergies, and they're just a little more careful with the breads, with the grains, with what they consume, with vegetation they consume. So again, it's almost like you said, bring it back to the ethical issue of what we're doing to animals, and that just far outweighs all this stuff. Like adjustments can be made. Like we're talking about, I don't know how to express it, abuse and cruelty. So if you thought of dogs being beaten, being tased, being castrated without anesthesia, being mutilated, being confined, and basically tortured, and then having their throat slit, if you thought about what goes on in the Yulin Dog Festival, and put it like that, think of a cow or a pig or a chicken or a turkey just like you would a dog in the same scenario. All this shit goes out the window. You're not going to contribute to that abuse and cruelty, no matter what it takes. You're not going to contribute to it. It's just that they're not seeing the animals. We got to bring it back to the animals. They're not seeing the animals. We spend way too much time talking about diet and nutrition and health and all this stuff. Gaius disagrees. He says we should focus more on that aspect. But I say there needs to be an ethical foundation and motivation to go vegan. Otherwise, they won't stick with it. So start with that basis from the beginning, and I think they'll be much more inclined to follow through, and be consistent with making this transition. So I don't know. There's a lot more we could say, but let's move on.
Oh yeah. And then later on, we'll maybe see some more.
They'll overrun the world. Again, yeah, they're stupid if they think that. First of all, they need to understand that we're breeding these animals into existence. We're breeding them into existence. They don't already exist. It's not like wild animals and they're just gonna multiply and multiply. Like these animals shouldn't even exist. We end up explaining all that stuff, but again, I don't think they're really worried about that. I think they just like that abstract thought came in their mind and thought, yeah, this is good retaliation. I could say this. That's all they're really doing. If we let all animals go, they'll have a horrible life and they'll die in the wild. Okay. So you don't care about the animals because you're eating them and stuff
giving them a horrible life and killing them.
And now you're so worried about the animals that you can't stop eating them. I'm eating them for their own good, because I'm doing this for their benefit because I care about them. Because if we let them go, they're going to get killed, or it's kind of an appeal to futility maybe. They're going to get killed anyway by natural predators. That's a complete misunderstanding, not knowing that the whole world's not going to go vegan overnight. It's
right. And here's
transition.
The thing about it.
It's going to happen slowly. It's not going to happen all at once.
Yeah, and like you mentioned before, if people go vegan, the animals are not bred in the first place, meaning that they never die by either our hands or the hands of other predators. So they never die because they're never bred. So it's completely wrong.
Yeah. So it's I lost my train of thought, but I was going to say something. That's why I don't mean to interrupt you, Chandler. I have to keep on my train of thought or I'll forget stuff. They're worried about the animals, but they're not worried about the animals. But they're worried about the animals in this hypothetical, and they don't understand that that these animals. Okay, yeah, there it is. We wouldn't have a surplus. This surplus that they're so concerned with would not exist because the animals that are left would be taken to sanctuary to live out their lives in peace. No more animals would be bred into existence, and whatever ones would be released into the wild would just acclimate, and they would acclimate into the wild populations, or they would get killed or whatever. But the point was, no more animals would be brought into existence. No more animals would be used and abused for selfish human, for human desires. That's the point. So it's an appeal to consequences that will never happen because it's faulty thinking from the start. It's a scenario that is not going to take place. So because you've imagined a false scenario, that's going to keep you And I would say it's completely disingenuous to say that they're concerned with the animals, because they obviously don't give a shit. That's the whole reason why we're talking to them, is because they're completely unaware of what's taking place. Let's see. I'm seeing if I can find it if he has it listed. Appeal to consequences. We haven't. Oh, here it is. We haven't gone to the Wikipedia yet, but it's because it's so extensive. There's such a great list there. Appeal to consequences is asserting that a position is false just because it is believed that the course of action that follows from that argument could lead to undesirable consequences. It can't be any more undesirable than what's happening right now for the animals. Nothing can be worse than what's going on right now. Like, if they get killed by natural predators, I would even prefer that over this prolonged, extended confinement and enslavement and torture. You follow me?
Yeah, and that's the thing, is I would agree. Now, see, what animals go through in the wild is terrible, because they will get caught by some predator and killed in some horrible way. That is true, but at least some of them escape. They can run away, they can escape, whereas those in captivity that are enslaved and kept where they can't run away from what the humans are doing to them, they still have it worse than any animal out in the wild.
This is like postulating and worrying about scenarios, I mean, that are so far off, and that the potential is it's not there for this to happen to begin with. So bring it back to the reality. Like, either you stab this pig in the throat, or you have a bowl of fruit. Like that, it's that simple. That's what we're talking about. Like, you're talking about stuff that's just leading your mind and your attention away from the problem at hand. Animals are stupid. They don't know what's happening to them. There are a lot of people. There are a lot of people in the South. There are a lot of people who've been raised this way. There are a lot of people in certain cultures, certain ethnicities, who are raised to think that animals are inferior and they're below us, and we have a right to dominate them. And they don't share our intelligence level. They're not as smart as we are. So that is a form of discrimination, like, straight up. That's speciesism. All of this comes down to speciesism, but that is like the most blatant example of speciesism, is just saying, well, they don't know what's happening to them anyway, so we have a right. And we know we can use that, if we use that argument and apply it to human beings. So a mentally challenged person, who someone with Down syndrome, someone with a learning disability, so that gives me the right to abuse them and kill them and eat their flesh, because they don't know what's happening to them, because they're not smart enough to realize what's going on. Intelligence level should never be the gauge. It should never be the basis for how we gauge moral, ethical behavior. If anything, the fact that they don't know what's going on makes them more innocent, makes it even more of a crime. I'm sure you have a lot to say about this.
Yeah, definitely. See, that's the thing, this idea that how intelligent somebody is. And first of all, intelligence is a very shaky subject, because people can't even agree on what intelligence is, And so it's like, we could decide that, well, these carnists, they're saying all this stupid stuff to us, so they must not be very intelligent. So let's kill the carnists so that we don't have to debate with them anymore and waste our time educating.
Let's eliminate all the stupid people. I mean, it's not a bad idea, but it's unethical. It's not a bad idea, but it's unethical, obviously, because there is value, there is intrinsic value and worth in living organisms, beyond just their cognitive abilities, beyond just their intellectual capacity. Life forms have intrinsic value and worth in and of themselves, not just because of what they can produce, not just because of their skill set or something. Like, I don't value my cat's not very smart, but he's a beautiful cat. He's a beautiful little animal, and I love him for what he is. But he thinks I'm always trying to kill him every time I stand up, every time we walk around, because he's feral. He is still very sort of hyper vigilant, but that doesn't give me the right to harm him. So that's essentially what they're saying, is I'm justifying this abuse and cruelty because they're stupid. So I'm smart, they're stupid, and I don't know. We probably spent too much time on this. We don't hear that often because most people are aware that most people have watched wildlife shows, and most people are animal lovers. That's not an issue, but it has come up, and I've heard it, especially just in highly like religious cultures that where this. Oh, let's go to the next one. This is a good segue. Animals were put here for us to eat. It says so in the Bible. So because it's in a book, written thousands of years ago, written in the Bronze Age, it's the ultimate case of cherry picking, because you're saying it's difficult. I have a whole other document that deals with this, with addressing the religious justification. So we're not going to spend too much time on it. But basically, it falls under the cherry picking fallacy, that you're just taking one thing and leaving out all the rest. Because the Bible also says, don't wear two types of the same fabric. It also says you should stone your disobedient children. It also says women don't have the right to speak in the church assembly. It also says that sickness and disease, come from demons. We don't believe any of that other stuff. We let all that go. We let our modern sensibilities guide us when it comes to certain things, and then other things we point to and we use as justification. And it's so stupid and it's so hypocritical.
Yeah,
But,
is cherry picking under the logical fallacies?
Yeah, it's a logical fallacy.
Oh, cool.
Let me see.
Let me look for that.
Look on the Wikipedia.
Okay, so cherry picking, suppressed evidence, incomplete evidence, act of pointing at individual cases or data that seem to confirm a particular position while ignoring a significant portion of related cases or data that may contradict that position. Okay, so what they do is they just pick out situations that or whatever, in this case, the Bible, that supports what they're saying, and ignoring the parts that go against what they're trying to argue for.
Yeah, I mean, did you think that it was just a figure of speech? It was just a saying? Like,
yeah, I knew it was a figure of speech. I knew what cherry picking meant because I see people do this.
Informal debate. It's a logical fallacy. Yeah, here it's under faulty generalizations. That's the category.
Yeah.
So yeah, you can call them out and say, yeah, that's a faulty generalization. Well, this is more for our knowledge, basically, to just empower us. Yeah, we know the category it falls under, and we could say we can give them another example of how they're doing that, possibly. We could say it's like reading a story and taking things out of context, and then pointing to it and saying, well, this is what it says, but really it says all this other stuff over here, and it's selective reasoning, sort of speak.
Yeah. So it's good to know that's a logical fallacy. I'm sure there's a lot of things that I just thought were figures of speech that I've heard, but didn't know that they were.
That's how they became figures of speech, just because of in Western culture, because of that sort of psychoanalytical knowledge.
They're so well known.
Okay, hungry children are starving overseas. That's a complete red herring, and what it's called is a fallacy of relative privation. Fallacy of relative privation. It's literally bringing up, an injustice that's occurring somewhere else to again detour and divert the attention and say, well, what about this? Well, what about that? Let's see if I can find the definition. Have you heard it? I mean, it's like saying, what about this problem? And there's this going on in the world, and you're worried about animals,
Yeah, I've heard that one before. Of course, I never took it seriously. That is not even worthy of a response, in my opinion, because it's like, because what we're discussing at the moment, whatever conclusion is reached, no matter what any of us say, will not change this other situation that they've mentioned over there to distract from the issue.
And a real quick counterpoint is to say, well, why can't we care about both? Why you think that this is all we do? I mean, we're also concerned about human rights and stuff, but this is just where our particular focus is. This is where we feel the greatest
and like we mentioned
for us.
before,
but Yeah.
like we mentioned before, the reason we talk more about the animals, these other animals, than we talk about what's happening with humans, because, like you said, humans can advocate for themselves. They can speak for themselves, whereas these other animals can't, and that's why they take priority, in my view.
In my opinion, this is the greater need because the victimhood, the prolonged, enduring oppression of animals is just so prolific, and so widespread and so perpetual. So, and they don't have advocates. They don't. I mean, they're just now developing in in the scope of like sort of deep time, or whatever you want to call it, in the history of human civilization. We're just now, recognizing that animals have rights. It's something that has gone on since the dawn of human existence. We have always used and enslaved those that we deem inferior, that we can control and dominate easily. Use them to serve our purpose.
Yeah, and it's interesting because with other issues like with sexism and racism, those issues have still not gone away entirely. You know,
Mhm.
but sure, like the law has changed, but that doesn't mean that blacks are still treated equal to whites or that women
it,
are still treated equal to men.
it goes back to speciesism and discrimination, of discriminating against others because they're different sizes, shapes, and colors. Yeah.
Yeah. So but it is all the same thing, and that's what people don't get. And you would just think that anybody who is against sexism and racism would automatically be against speciesism, but I think a lot of them have not admitted that it is the same thing.
No, it's part the power of popular opinion, I guess, of just how widespread it is. Our culture, it's normalized. So because it's been normalized to such a degree, it's really difficult to break away, to get out of your cultural conditioning and see it as being wrong. Here's the definition, by the way: fallacy of relative privation or appeal to other problems is dismissing the argument just because other things are going on in the world as if that's relevant. The example is, there are people dying in Syria, and you want to stand here telling people to be vegan. There are other issues in the world we need to be focusing on right now. So, actually, my heart tells me intuitively it's because they don't care about animals. That goes right back to the fact that they see human beings as more important than animals. They are, selectively discriminating, against other species, because the problems aren't occurring, to them directly or to those they know. It's happening to the other, what they deem as, another, uh, just another life form that is not, it's not a priority to them. I would say with that, we got to get to, how do you feel about animals? Like, honestly, what do you think about animals? How do what, do you, do you agree with animal cruelty? If you don't agree with animal cruelty, then let's bypass all this shit, like worried about what's going on somewhere else. There's animal cruelty taking place right now because of our, food choices, because of animal agriculture. That's the relevant issue. So bring it back to that. Bring it back again to the ethical, the personhood of animals. Seeing what's actually taking place, and, try to help them, or just don't allow them to take you off in that direction. Be like, well, I give to charities too, and like don't take the bait and start saying, I care about human rights, and I do this, and I volunteer here and there and there. And in the meantime, they're sitting back and they're like, so they don't have to. All of these excuses, it's a way for them to sit back and kind of like regroup and kind of think of another excuse. It's giving them
Yeah.
time. Don't
Yeah.
don't let up. Don't give them that time while you're going blah 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 blah. And I do care about this, and I do care about that too. Why did you take the bait? That was just a
Yeah.
diversion.
And I think I may have made that mistake in the past.
Oh
But
yeah,
here's
we
another
all do.
thing. Yeah. But here's another thing to consider, Poffo. So, yeah, on one hand, it's true that we do care about what happens to humans, although that's not our main focus because the animals need us more. But let's be completely serious. We could go full on misanthrope. We totally could and say that I hate the human race, and if children are dying in places in the world, then better so that they won't continue to hurt the animals. You can totally go that route, and that can also be valid because it's no accident that many vegans do want the human race to end because of what they're doing. So the idea that we somehow are obligated to care about these humans, that in itself, I don't even agree with entirely.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
I'm trying. Yeah, it's deeper. It goes deeper. Okay, because what that does is that discredits you as a moral authority. If you do that, and you're discrediting yourself as a moral authority because they're trying to say you need to care about everything. You need to care. Don't ask me to care about what's going on over here if you're not concerned about what's going on over here. And according to their conditioning, this is more important because it's affecting humans. But another route is to say animal agriculture is affecting humans. It's the leading cause of starvation and and poverty and hungry children are exist because we're feeding all of the grain and the corn and the soy and the crops and the vegetation to the animals so that we could slaughter them and eat them. This is a human rights issue. You could explain that to them and it'll educate them. But again, why are they saying it? I would really question why are they actually saying this? It's just a diversion tactic, I think.
Yeah, I know. And see, while it's true that it is better for humans to go vegan, it's better for their health. It's better for because it can solve world hunger theoretically as well. I mean, it is better for humans, but the way that I am wired, and this is another topic that we've discussed a little bit. I only promote the ethical side to the animals, like, sure, I'm fine with people mentioning the health benefits and all that other stuff, but it seems like if they go in it with the motive, well, it's good for me, then their focus is still wrong. And it's
I've said this before that I wouldn't have stayed a vegan if it was just for health reasons. I never did it for health reasons. And we should have a podcast about this where we hash it out with Gaius because he feels the exact opposite. There was one more thing I wanted to say. You can turn it around. You can do what they're doing. You can turn it around and be like, what are you doing about the hungry children overseas? How much money are you giving to those children? Like, when's the last time you went on a mission trip or whatever? Like really don't, it's calling the kettle black, so to speak. Like don't, I'm pointing out one injustice. Don't jump over here and point out another injustice that you're not even doing anything about. So you're a hypocrite. I mean, the conversation won't go smoothly if you take that route. But the point is,
right,
be aware of that they're probably not doing anything themselves. Like this is just dialogue. If I could stress anything, this is pseudo-intellectualism. This is just words. It's a word game.
Yeah,
and I want to get away from the word game.
Here's an interesting thing. This has happened because my first exposure to logical fallacies was in abortion debates and seeing what people were saying, and this happens all the time. Like people try to say, "Well, how many children have you adopted?" And if you haven't adopted 50
you don't
children,
know.
Then that somehow justifies people killing them, and people do this. Like, what? Like, just because a person it isn't able to adopt children in their current situation or doesn't want to, that does not mean that automatically means that they have to be in favor of killing them. Like, what? There's no connection.
It's a difficult thing. We're talking about a lot of psychology here. Let's try to move on and and get through these because we'll spend all day on this, man. And I gotta go do Q tonight. So, what about human overpopulation? That's the real problem. Okay, I agree with you. That is a problem. But that's a red herring in relation to this conversation. You're just trying to lead me away from, the focus, the point that's on the table here. Like, we could spend forever and say, yeah, I'm an anti-natalist and I don't agree. There's human overpopulation is a problem. But why are they saying it? Get to the core. Get to the motivation of why they're saying it. You're presenting them with animal abuse, animal cruelty, and they're saying, well, humans reproducing, that's what's really causing this. And I could say, well, capitalism, that's what's really causing this. And, Judeo-Christian indoctrination and cultural myths, that's what's really causing this. But I'm asking you, what are you going to do about it? You can actually do something about this, though. Like, you have the choice 3-4 times a day to say no to this violence, to this unethical, um, system that is destroying the planet, destroying our bodies,
Yeah.
and obviously destroying millions of animals. You have the choice. You have the power. Okay.
Yeah.
If you don't want to have kids, or you want to have kids, whatever. If you have kids, raise them right, raise them to be vegan, and then you can help. If you decide to have kids, if you make that mistake, then you can help this problem. But citing another issue that may be a valid issue, it's a valid issue. You're right. It's because there's so many freaking people in the world, and they're highly uneducated, and they've all been conditioned, and they're all subject to tradition. Yeah, you're right. But I'm talking to you right now, okay? And the real problem is the mentality of the culture, the philosophy, the general zeitgeist of is the sort of the spirit of an error. That's the definition of zeitgeist. It's the spirit of an error. And the basically our general mentality is that animals are here for us to use, hopefully not abuse. This is the way they see it, but that's just the way things are. Some people think we have a symbiotic relationship with them, and whatever. They have all these excuses, but the point is, the real problem is the way people think. So I'm addressing how you think. So tell me how you think and how you feel about this. And again, show them the footage, and or the images, or whatever, or cite the statistics. Okay, and then get away from this idea of always taking the conversation, somewhere else. Soy is dangerous and unhealthy. Now, we know that soy is one of the most genetically modified foods that exist besides corn. It's true, but organic soy, organic tofu, whatever, organic soy milk, is a perfectly viable, healthy source of plant-based protein. And this kind of goes along the same thing. They'll talk about pesticides, they'll talk about GMOs, they'll talk about Monsanto, they'll talk about all these other things about the government, and get into conspiracy theories. And it's like, dude, like, okay, like, we're feeding the soy to the animals, we're eating the animals. So if we're so worried about the consumption of soy, we wouldn't be feeding it to the animals in the first place, right? Like, it's again, it's a cultural myth. Like, we can identify it as such, we can deconstruct it with information, or we can just and really circumnavigate and question and say, are you really worried about soy, or do you just not want to give up pizza? Like, come on. Like, where's this coming from? Really, where's it coming from?
Yeah, and like when they bring up like the pesticides and stuff, they don't care. They never cared about that before.
But they just came back from Burger King, and they just ate, at whatever, at Chili's or Outback Steakhouse, and they ate all this stuff, and they have no idea what's going into that food.
They don't care about what sort of pesticides may have been used on the crops that the animals were fed. They don't care about the GMO stuff. They don't care about the extra hormones injected into the animals that they ate. They don't care about that. But then as soon as somebody's a vegan, now all of a sudden they're worried about soy giving them man titties. Like, because
the truth is, they don't actually care about this stuff. They're just using it as an excuse. All of a sudden, they're a nutritionist. All of a sudden, they know about anthropology and history. All of a sudden, they're a plant advocate. It's so stupid. Let's move on. What about owning pets? We hear this a lot. This is another red herring, but it comes down to a fundamental misunderstanding of what veganism is, and what the kind of relationship we have with specifically domesticated animals. Dogs and cats, and horses are kind of in the middle there. Dogs, cats, horses are highly domesticated animals, and we do have somewhat of a symbiotic relationship with them, and they are dependent on us. So in a way, there's a point there. But to say you don't want to contribute to the murder of cows and pigs and turkeys, and somehow making the jump to I care for a dog or a cat, in their minds, that comes down to a fundamental misunderstanding of what veganism is. It's almost like they think veganism means we should have nothing to do with animals. We should not interfere with animals at all. Like, we should not even look at animals. It doesn't make sense. It's like, of course, we're still going to care for animals. We're still going to have sanctuaries. Of course, highly domesticated animals like dogs and cats, we're going to care for, but we don't consider them. We view them differently. They're companion animals. We do away with the idea of ownership. We only adopt rescues and strays and ferals. We don't perpetuate the breeding, the systematic breeding of domesticated animals. That's the difference.
Yeah.
So a brief explanation of that, I think sort of intuitively, I would say they're using it as an excuse. It's definitely an excuse. It's definitely like an evasion, a deflection. They're deflecting it, putting it back on you, of course. But I think it also has to do with not understanding what veganism is. If we could just explain what veganism is, philosophy and way of living which seeks to exclude as far as is possible and practicable any and all forms of animal abuse and cruelty, any forms of use or cruelty to animals for food, clothing, or any other purpose. In dietary terms, it denotes the practice of dispensing with products that contain I'm butchering this, I know. anything derived wholly or partly from animals. There's also the definition it gets into. And what is it by default? And by extension promotes the production of plant-based alternatives. So
Yeah.
that was my horrible paraphrasing of the definition of veganism, but you get the point.
Yeah.
So, yeah, go ahead.
The only time people's pets is even a discussion that vegans ever have is about feeding their pets a plant-based diet, because that's what we would want to do if you're gonna have a dog or cat.
Yeah, that actually comes up, but I think this is more of just the idea of owning pets. That always comes up as, well, you own pets and you have to feed them, dog food that's made from animals. You have to feed them meat. But this is also the idea of, well, you shouldn't own pets. I've heard this. You've never heard this? You shouldn't own pets if you're a vegan, because they think, okay, we're against animal enslavement. Well, that's a form of enslavement. Well, where are they going to go? They have become so ingrained in our culture. We've domesticated wolves and coyotes and foxes to become what they are. I keep pointing at my cat. I don't know why I'm pointing at my cat. He's not a dog. He's not a canine, but like a Chihuahua looks nothing like a wolf, like a timber wolf. But we have, through artificial selection, breeding programs, hybridization and stuff, that they are now these little things that you could fit in a purse, a little Pomeranian and stuff. So what are you suggesting? Again, that's almost like an extreme scenario. Like we should just free all of the domesticated dogs and cats. That's not what we're saying. We're saying that they don't understand the lines drawn, because in their minds, they can't even picture existing without using animal products. They can't picture existing without eating meat, eggs, and dairy. They can't imagine it.
Yeah.
So they've misunderstood. So they eliminate like all interaction with animals. That's kind of where this is coming from.
Yeah,
like,
you know what? That's not actually something I've come across, bizarrely enough. Like I never in my life would I have thought that. I've never heard of a vegan that told people that they had to let their domesticated dogs and cats go in and out in the wild. Like, where? What?
That's in their minds, in the Carnist, meat eater, non-vegan mind. It comes from a fundamental misunderstanding of what the vegan message is. That's all. I feel really bad that I butchered the definition of veganism, but you get the picture. Let's move on. So humans are omnivores. Okay. How many times have we heard this? And I'll say straight up, yes, behaviorally, culturally, traditionally, we are omnivores. We eat everything. But that doesn't mean that's how we're physiologically designed. Our bodies are not physically designed to process meat, eggs, and dairy like this. Essentially, it's an appeal to nature. It's one of the most common ones. It's an appeal to nature saying, well, we're just like a bear. We're just like, I'm trying to think, a badger, a wolverine, scavenger, raccoon. These are all omnivores. We're just like them. We eat everything. They eat other animals, so it's okay for us to eat other animals. Yeah. And it's an appeal to nature, which an appeal to nature means. Just because something, it's saying that because something occurs in nature, because it's happening in the wild, that makes it morally acceptable and ethical in human societies, and that is
it's
completely
just so
false.
bizarre. I mean, there's several layers. I gotta say, okay, if they're a bear, they're a lion or whatever. They're just the same thing. Then why do they have to cook their meat? Why do they have to season it with all this stuff? Why do they have to cut up in small pieces? Why do they have to modify it so much so that they don't even no longer even notice it's a meat?
No, nothing about it is natural. Nothing about animal consumption in modern culture is natural. Nothing about it has ever been natural, actually, because we don't eat them raw. We don't drink the blood. We don't have the stomach acids. We don't have the defense against the bacteria and the parasites. Like we have to cook everything. We have to process it. We have to season the shit out of it. We have to cover it in vegetables and sauces. Nobody eats meat, eggs, and dairy as they come, because we would get sick. In their initial form, we would get sick. It's an appeal to nature. I'm going to try to get through these quicker now. Let's see. We have canines. That's an appeal to nature. Lions kill zebras. That's an appeal to nature. It's a circle of life. That's an appeal to nature. Obviously, one of the most common appeals to nature, but it's called a reification. Reification fallacy. Let me see if I can find this real quick. It's an abstraction or abstract belief or hypothetical concept that is treated as if it were concrete or a real thing that is directly observable, as opposed to something that is just mere words and abstraction. So the circle of life, that's a saying, that's a phrase, that's a abstract sort of a concept that we've used to describe something. That's not a moral justification for committing harm to another life form. It's you're pointing at something that is not concrete. It doesn't exist in reality. Thinking, because you've been taught, it's been pounded into your head, circle of life, cycle of life. I think on some level we've watched too many wildlife shows. We watch too many wildlife documentaries, and The Lion King is on repeat in our heads, like circle of life. And it's a beautiful concept. It's a pantheistic concept. We accept that it's all part of the circle of life, but that does not justify killing and abusing and harming others. And that goes back to the personhood of animals. We have to see them as others, as individuals. But they use this abstract concept that we know exists on a certain level, but in a way that is just unfounded, and it falls apart once you really break it down. Everything dies. That's kind of like almost saying the same thing. Everything dies. You're just making a statement of fact. Well, I noticed that I probably use this scenario too much, but I raped this girl. Well, there's suffering in the world. It's like me saying there's suffering in the world, so it's okay for me to rape this girl. I stole this car. I beat up this kid. I punched this old lady in the face. Well, humans bruise and we bleed. So it doesn't make sense. It's like you're making a statement.
It's like that
to justify an immoral behavior, as if the existence of negativity, the existence of evil, somehow justifies the fact that you're committing that evil, taking away all your responsibility, because evil already exists. So let's just add to it. I guess that's the mentality.
Yeah.
Just so I could find it. Ignorato elenchi. These are all Latin terms. So see if I can find it. Hold on. It's an argument. I'm probably saying it wrong, but ignorato elenchi is an argument that may in itself be valid. It's like I said, it's something that exists. It may be valid, but it does not address the issue in question. For example, meat has all the essential amino acids. Yeah, so meat has amino acids. Well, so does human flesh. I mean, so should I cannibalize? I mean, so does cat flesh. It's full of amino acids. Does that mean I should torture and kill and mutilate and consume my cat? It makes no sense. You're pointing to something that's a truth, but you know, it's not directly connected. I almost want to say it's a non sequitur. It
Yeah,
doesn't connect to the point at hand.
well, it's irrelevant. It's just totally
Irrelevant.
irrelevant if it has
Yeah.
nothing to do with what's going on. And you know,
Actually, it's what's called the irrelevant. I think one of these is called the irrelevant fallacy. Irrelevant.
yeah, this seems like it
Fallacy.
would be. And here's another thing. I just had this thought. You know, people
Yeah.
do this kind of thing. Like earlier when we were talking about, well, if we don't kill them, they'll overpopulate or whatever. Well, here's the funny thing about that is that they don't kill their dogs or cats, and they don't kill like certain other weird, like nobody's out killing ostriches worried about whether they're going to populate or overpopulate or not, you know.
Yeah.
So it's like, why are they being speciesist? Because they need to apply their dumb arguments equally to the species rather than just it's because it makes
None
no
of
sense.
it. None of it is consistent. It's. Uh, but meat is tasty. That's an appeal to pleasure. But I love bacon. That's another appeal to pleasure. I can never give up cheese. Appeal to pleasure. You'll never get the whole world to go vegan, so you might as well give up. That's the nirvana fallacy, kind of like the
I know,
fallacy.
I've heard all these before here.
Yeah. I'm against factory farming, but as long as the animal is treated well and is given a quick and humane death, it's okay. Quick and humane death. That's an oxymoron. You know, a humanely slaughtered animal. That's an oxymoron. That's inconsistent morality. That's a justification. Um, you know, that's overlooking the foundational premise, the point that it's all unnecessary to begin with. It's because they're coming from a position where they're already thinking that it's normal, natural, and necessary that they make these excuses. If you could deconstruct that, none of this, they wouldn't even say these things. Because if it's unnecessary, then there's no reason to try and justify doing something that's wrong in a better way, and trying to be more kind and considerate when you're about to slit someone's throat. If you
Yeah,
don't have to slit
and,
if you don't have to slit their throat in the first place, why are you doing it? You're missing
and
the whole
here's
point that
another
we don't
thing
have to
about
do
it.
it.
And here's
Yeah.
another thing that I think people might be missing here. Just because they support, they're fine with humanely slaughtered animals, which it is an oxymoron. But just because they think that they should be killed painlessly doesn't mean that what they are buying in the store and eating is humanely slaughtered.
No, 99% of
So
all meat and eggs and dairy we consume come from factory farms. You know,
yeah,
they're not these happy cows, you know, frolicking in the fields, and
yeah,
it's all in their minds. It's all the marketing.
yeah.
We're gonna have to. So we're almost an hour into this. I'm gonna have to just run through these, or maybe we can do a part two because there's so many of them.
Yeah, because
Um,
if you're short on time, maybe we could just do a part two to this when we have time next.
let me read them, and then we'll go. I'll just read them quickly, and then we can maybe off air or another time really get into it, and you know, and just kind of deconstruct and break them down. But just so like the audience is familiar with all these, because we've heard these just so many times. It's so incessantly annoying and redundant to hear it, and also the explanations that we're forced to give. Can never give up cheese. You'll never get the whole world to go vegan, so you might as well give up. I'm against factory farming. I only eat a little bit of meat. I only eat a little bit of meat. You know, I only rape and kill, you know, once or twice a week instead of 3 times a week. Instead of, you know, doing it every day, I only do it once a day now. It makes no sense. I only buy locally raised, grass-fed, free-range, wild-caught, hormone-free, certified organic, USDA approved, non-GMO, no antibiotics, nitrates, fillers, or preservatives. I added all those because I'm just trying to include them all into one thing. You know, fair trade, yeah, free-range, grass-fed, you know, organic.
It's like, hey, it's okay if I kill you as long as I feed you grass first.
This is just a way for it's marketing. It's a way to make the consumer feel better, and they're just regurgitating what's been stamped on the packages and what's been you know, what's been sold to the public, what's been propagated and sold to the public, to boost their sales. That's all it is. So you're repeating a marketing ploy. Yes, there are some small farms. There are some there are these distinctions. But when it really comes down to it, if all of it is unnecessary, and they always end up with a bolt to the head and stabbed in the neck, submerged in electrified vats, whatever it might be, whatever killing method it is, they're still being killed. They're still being murdered unnecessarily. So that's the point. That like people are trying to minimize the immoral, unethical actions or behavior, by labeling it these things, or the companies are trying to like promote welfare. Basically, this is the welfarist approach: is the idea that, well, if we give them better conditions, blah blah blah, then at least they'll be happy and they'll be content before they're killed. But they're missing the abolitionist approach is like we shouldn't even look at them as food. We shouldn't look at other animals as food. We shouldn't be enslaving them in the first place. We shouldn't be breeding them in the first place. This missing the whole point. This is already after the fact. Anyway, so much I could say about that because we hear that more than any other. Along with that, I only believe, I believe in humanely slaughtered meat, humanely slaughtered. So I'm losing my place here. Animals would eat you if they had the chance. Slippery slope fallacy, and I don't even understand it. Somehow imposing human morality on an animal, and if the situation was reversed, that gives you the justification to kill it. I mean, a bee would sting me, so I should kill all the bees. A bear would attack me, so we should shoot all the bears. It's the most primitive, stupid. I've heard it. Pigs are omnivores. They would turn around and rip you to pieces. They tear you apart if you were locked in a room with them. So we have to eat them. We have to eat them first. We have to get them before they get us.
Thing about it, Poffo. Okay, yeah. I have to respond to this one. The funny part about it is all those animals that would eat us if we were locked in a room with them. Those are not the ones that people are eating. They're eating herbivores who aren't causing them harm. So
technically, a pig is an omnivore. They eat everything, but they're kind of scavengers too. But yeah, we're mostly eating herbivores. We're eating animals that eat vegetation. These animals would cause us no harm. Right. When's the last time? I'm quoting Gary Yourofsky almost verbatim here. When's the last time a cow, a pig, a chicken attacked someone? When's the last time a goat or a fish was a threat to your life? Our ancestors ate meat. It's an appeal to tradition. We're above the animals. That's the might makes right fallacy. We're at the top of the food chain. Once again, the reification, the might makes right. Animals eat other animals. Appeal to nature. Eating meat is natural. Appeal to nature. Life feeds on life. Appeal to nature. It's my personal choice. That's a big one. I have a whole section devoted to that, to explaining how personal choice has no bearing whatsoever on whether an action is right or wrong. You need to get your B12. You need to eat meat to get your B12. That's a myth. Eating meat helped our brains grow. It's another myth. And I think sort of an appeal to nature too, because we're talking about sort of early hominids and how they developed and whatever was necessary for development back then. I mean, slavery was necessary to, in order to establish this country. So does that mean we should still own slaves? Just because of how something was done or a necessity that took place in the past at an earlier time period when we were less developed has no bearing on current behavior in civilized society. We need dairy for calcium. Myth. We need meat for protein. Myth. What about Native Americans? Red herring. What about Eskimos? Red herring. Fish don't feel pain. Myth. Plants are alive too. Ignorato elici, and that's a tu quo qui argument. Basically, you yourself do it. It's like pointing the finger back and saying, well, you're just as bad as me, so don't tell me to stop doing something if you're doing the same thing. All excuses. It's all bullshit. We need to eat fish to get our omega-3s. I work out, so I need to eat chicken and dairy for protein. That's just a complete myth, excuse. Plant protein is incomplete protein. Complete myth. Honey is good for you. That's a myth. Actually, that was a myth that I believed for a long time. That the medicinal benefits of honey, it was the last thing that I gave up as a vegan. Milking cows doesn't kill them. Ignorado and lychee, and I would say that's just a myth because it does kill them because it kills
Yeah.
their babies, and they eventually get sent to the same slaughterhouses as the beef cows. I have to rush through these, but we will revisit these another time.
Yeah, we'll continue going through them more in depth next time.
I don't have time to read all the labels. What about backyard eggs? My grandpa was a farmer. He cared for his animals. Anecdotal. You can't be 100% vegan because you might step on ants. I got that one from you. They're nirvana fallacy, or perfection, fallacy of perfection. What about bacteria, microorganisms? Red herring, nirvana fallacy, assuming bacteria are indeed sentient. Again, I've always said this, our sheer size and scale says we cannot focus on that. Remember the definition of veganism, only what is possible and practicable.
Yeah, and it simply isn't possible to avoid killing bacteria anyway.
Right. Cows need to be milked or their udders will explode. We have to hunt and kill deer to keep the populations down. Veganism isn't for everybody. I have a certain blood type. Excuse, myth. These are all myths. I tried going vegan once and I got sick. Anecdotal. Humans need to eat meat in order to survive. Excuse, complete myth. You need to eat meat for iron or you'll become anemic. Cultural myth. I want to enjoy life. I can't live on beans and alfalfa sprouts. I got that from Daniel. He was like, I want to enjoy life. I'm not going to limit myself. Again, a misunderstanding of what veganism is, of what vegan food is. It's an appeal to emotion, an appeal to pleasure. If you don't eat meat and dairy, you'll get sick and die. Myth. What about the poor farmers? They'll be out of a job. Appeal to consequences. Everyone, everywhere can't be vegan. Red herring, nirvana fallacy. Veganism is a first world luxury. Red herring. You use technology and drive a car. Tu quo qui fallacy. I think vegans are sanctimonious. Ad hominem. We know who says that a lot, right?
Yeah. Well, here's the funny thing is that you would have to use your car less if the whole world went vegan, because then you wouldn't have to travel as much and try to educate all these people.
As if driving a car is synonymous with boiling a turkey alive.
It's not, obviously. It's still
cutting off the tail, breaking the tails of leather cows and shoving pepper in their eyes, as if it's the same thing. Somewhere down the road, someone is suffering for the production of those materials in overseas and other countries. What can we do about it? If you want to ride a bike, ride a bike. If you don't want to drive a car, fine. I'm carrying all the stuff, the materials in my car. I'm using that car for a good purpose. The materials to the AV demonstration. I'm traveling around. I'm doing something good with it. The damage is done. Like, yeah, I would like to drive an electric car. I would like to, to completely cut down on greenhouse gases and emissions and whatever. It's not always possible. It's not always practical.
Right. Yeah, and that's the thing about it. And what's so bizarre is, not everything is practical or possible for everybody at every time.
But one thing is what we put in our mouths, what we eat. That's the one thing we have control over. That's the one thing we actually have a lot of power and choice and say, and it's actually the power of the consumer, because without the demand, the supply will stop. That's all the power is in our hands. So I think vegans are sanctimonious. Obviously, Peter says that all the time, and it's an ad hominem. A vegan was mean to me once, so that discredits the whole movement and philosophy of veganism. That's the association fallacy, basically. Why don't you care about humans? That's a red herring. It's kind of the same thing. A lot of these are just almost coming from the same mentality, the same place. Essentially, why aren't you worried about the real problems in the world? It's a red herring. Vegans kill more animals than meat eaters. That's a myth and a tu quo qui fallacy. Plants have feelings too. Myth, tu quo qui. So there they are. They all fall under like myth, excuse, apathy, diversion, misinformation, appeals to futility, appeal to nature. Some people, it's just ignorance. It's usually distraction. A straw man, a red herring. We didn't actually mention straw man anywhere, but Tu quoque fallacy, appeal to majority, anecdotal evidence, egocentrism, logical fallacy, discrimination, bait and switch, cognitive distortion, defense mechanism, and moving the goalpost. Almost every conversation, they fall victim to this moving the goalpost. So once we thoroughly explain their excuse, their rationalization, their justification, and they have no argument, then they jump to something else, and then we have to sit there and explain that, and then they jump to something else. So it's endless. Like it's completely counterproductive and sort of circular to just keep explaining things that people, if they just sat down and mindfully considered this stuff, would have their own answers. But that's the issue, is these aren't things that they really care about. They're not things that they're really thinking about. They're just saying it in response to you. So what we got to do is we got to talk to them differently, so that we're not getting these defenses, and this wall gets put up of distractions and evasion tactics, and just get to the core of why they're saying it and speak to them on a different level. And that's my goal with this workshop.
Yeah, and that's the thing, man. Is hopefully we will just, I mean, we'll save people so much time, so they don't get sidetracked on all these things, because these things. I mean, it's sad because most of them are completely obviously a distraction from the real issue and just excuses because they don't want to change. And a few of them are just myths that they believe, which are easily debunked pretty much, And so it's like the only people who are worth responding to are those who are genuinely asking honest questions, because they don't know.
That's a good point. Yeah, we should. That's a good point. Was we need to be selective with who we talk to, especially in street activism. Like if you see them making there's actually something called a poo-poo fallacy. Where you're dismissing an argument perceived as unworthy or serious consideration. So someone comes up and they're just like, "Oh, this bullshit again. You guys are just whatever. Let it." Like you're not gonna go up to them and be like, "Sir, would you please give me some time and I'll explain to you." Da-da-da. You're wasting your time. Like if people are dismissing you outright. I mean, we hear it all the time. People ride by and they're like, "Bacon," or they yell just obnoxious things. They say all kinds of derogatory, in the face of this cruelty that they're seeing on the screen, and they just kind of smirk and laugh and walk away. Like we are not, supposed to talk to those people. We need to let it not affect us. Focus on those who are more receptive to it, who are pulled in, who are watching the footage or online, who are genuinely asking questions, or who are confused, who have misunderstood the definition of veganism, who are who are earnestly trying to understand. That's our target audience, and we need to be more selective with who we talk to. Otherwise, we just exhaust ourselves. And I don't even know if it's a matter of exhaustion. The negativity that I receive on a daily basis from just idiots and insensitive, apathetic, self-centered, selfish people it's overwhelming. Just the negativity of it all, combined with the knowledge that I have of what animals are experiencing, is enough to just destroy a person if you don't have a strong constitution, if you don't have I don't know, if you don't have positive coping mechanisms to counteract all this. So it has to do with just letting ourselves get strung out and getting stretched in too many different directions. We wear ourselves thin by dealing with so much negativity. So be selective about who you talk to. It's definitely a huge, a good point to make.
And that's just it. It is exhausting to me, and that's why I don't like to get into this stuff very often unless I'm just having hangouts with the people that I can talk to, usually other vegans already, because, oh man, I'm not equipped to handle these people and there's excuses. I'm not patient enough or quick enough to really think about this stuff.
Yeah. It can become really personal. We can take it personal, and we can kind of lose our cool. and get really angry and upset, and then we just perpetuate the vegan stereotype of that we're angry and we're unstable. I mean, it's really difficult because
I know.
we're having to represent something, and it just sucks. It's like the burden is on us, you know, to be these like shining examples, and we're only human. I mean, we literally are up against some of the worst negativity that exists. I mean, and I got to bring it back though. Obviously, we're not suffering like the animals are suffering. We're not suffering the way people in third world countries are suffering. I mean, these are psychological, emotional burdens that they are. You know, they're internal, and it's
Right.
difficult in that way. They're I'm not going to say all other people have real problems. These are major obstacles and, you know, challenges that we face um, as um, as Americans, as people living in the West. Obviously, we're in a privileged position. Um, you know, but it's that I've mentioned this before. It's that people like you and I are we are invested. We're engrossed in this, and other people go to work, they come home, they have their pleasure, they have their recreation, you know, whatever. Occasionally they'll think about this stuff. Occasionally they'll give to charity, but their lives are not as are not as self-sacrificing or magnanimous as others. Like especially
Yeah.
animal rights activists are very magnanimous, and they're giving so much of their time and energy. Um, so it's difficult, man, and it weighs down on you really heavily. So I'm trying to find better and more efficient ways um, to approach these conversations. So that's what this workshop is about. I'm developing this workshop for my group, and we will definitely revisit these things. And off air as well, we can actually take more time to go through. It's a shame. I wish I could have talked about each one. Each one,
Yeah.
there's so much we can explore with each of those excuses. It's really like a perfect springboard into various conversations,
Oh
because
yeah.
we're really uh, analyzing the psychology and the philosophy and you know, the cultural biases that exist. So
But
but
yeah, but you know, it actually is good to split this up
yeah,
because I mean, our videos are already long enough as it is, and if we were try to do it all at once, we'd end up with like 6 or 7 hours straight. And how many people would actually listen to all that in
yeah,
one go, you know? So it's actually better so they can listen to this part, and if they've listened to that and wait a while, then they can listen to the next one. So it's actually good split up that way, in my opinion, actually.
yeah. So we'll revisit just for the sake of discussion and sort of education. We'll revisit once we've actually classified all of these, because some of them I just kind of skipped over, and we'll go back to it. And then I'm also going to once I've sort of determined uh, the most expedient route to take in dealing with this stuff, I'm gonna discuss that. I'm gonna communicate it to the public. That this is just to sum it up. This is kind of what I'm trying to do. First of all, I was going to classify all these. This is what we're sort of attempting to do today, under which logical fallacies they fall under. Um, the second thing I want to do is I want to really stress the point that the root causes of carnism, and this was outlined by Melanie Joy, is that it's normal, natural, and necessary. Those are the myths in their mind. All the thinking, the distorted thinking, is coming from the fact that they think that consuming animal products, that using animals is normal, natural, and necessary. And if we could just help them see that it's not, that these are myths, it's completely abnormal, it's completely unnatural, and it's completely unnecessary. Um, that would be just a huge obstacle to overcome. That's actually what we're doing in every conversation. We're kind of trying to prove how completely unnecessary all of this is.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
those
because
three things, knowing those three things, is a huge step, a first step. Did you want to say something? I'm looking at the screen, so I can't see your face.
oh yeah, well yeah, I mean, but yeah, see, that's true. People, they still think it's necessary. They're still believing all these myths. And so even if we can never fully address all the fallacies, just getting rid of all these myths would take away so many of these excuses. You know, all these reasons people have for not going vegan. It's just false beliefs. You
But
know, carnism is like the biggest religion ever, more harmful than
it is.
Christianity.
It's a cult. It's a cult. It is.
Yeah.
It's a cult that we're all indoctrinated in, complete with blood sacrifices, complete with I would call cannibalism, and ridiculous. It's incredibly deceptive and it's incredibly pervasive. The new sort of approaches, the alternate sort of angles or the subjects that and the mentalities that I want to tackle in reaching people are, I'll just read through these real quickly. The personhood of animals, the personal choice argument, the fact that human beings don't know what they are, interspecies milk consumption of humans past infancy. The fact that we're drinking, breast milk beyond the point where we're weaned, where we're naturally weaned from it, and on top of the fact we're drinking other species milk. The
Yeah.
archaic, barbaric, and antiquated nature of carnism and animal use. And then number 6, the fact that we've all been lied to. We've been brainwashed, indoctrinated, inculcated with cultural myths, popular opinion, and misinformation. So it's the idea that, like, just straight up, you have to let them know everything I'm about to say to you, you've probably never heard before. And it's going to be difficult to take seriously because everything else that you've heard says the opposite. Everything you think you know is wrong, basically. Everything you think you know, what you've heard from doctors, authority figures, health experts, your family, your culture, it's actually false. And what I'm about to say to you is going to be odd and strange, and it's going to seem, very out there. But that's because of the fact that our culture, our society, is just completely inculcated and brainwashed and conditioned to think a certain way about these subjects and topics, and it's false. So, any of those things. Then additional subjects are the religious argument and the definition of veganism, and I mentioned that briefly. That we really need to just let people know what veganism actually is from the get-go. I don't think we should sell veganism to them. We shouldn't be trying to convert them automatically and even speaking about veganism. But the understanding of what it is needs to be established. And if it was, it would they wouldn't even, it would bypass a lot of the excuses and rationalizations because they already have a false idea of what it is. So let's establish what it actually is. A philosophy and way of living which seeks to exclude as far as is possible cruelty to animals for food, clothing, or any other purpose, and by extension promotes the development and use of animal-free alternatives for the benefit of humans, animals, and the environment. In dietary terms, it denotes the practice of dispensing with all products derived wholly or partly from animals. That's the official definition of veganism from the Vegan Society.
Yep.
All
Yeah,
right,
man.
man. So, thank you for the opportunity, Chandler, and we will do this again. We will try to make some progress off air. I'm not sure today, but definitely in the next coming days. You just let me know when you're free.
Yeah, totally, man. And enjoy your cube of truth.
It's can't ever say it's really enjoyable, but
Well, true.
it's where I'm doing what I believe is right, and I'm trying to raise awareness and educate the public in what I believe is the most effective way possible is just by showing them the footage and having these conversations. And I'm probably going to hear like almost all those excuses tonight. I'll take notes and I'll get back to you and I'll be like, yep, I heard this, I heard this, I heard this, and I'll explain to you how I addressed it and what I said in response.
Yeah, and that's good. And what's cool, we need to just start showing your our videos that we're doing. We just need to start showing those at your events and stuff too.
No, there's a specific format. I mean, we just have to show the raw footage and then have the conversations. Some people suggest having like vegan food there to kind of show them the alternative, or showing pictures of happy cows, showing pictures of chickens and sheep and lambs and pigs and turkeys, like how smart and intelligent they are, like showing them happy, safe, and free in sanctuaries to help them make the connection that like these are the animals that we're doing this to. We're doing all this horrible shit. This is how it could be, and they've probably never even seen a cow doing anything but standing there getting milked. Cows jump and they leap and they're very like intelligent and inquisitive and
Yeah, and what's sad is I've never even gotten to see that.
Well, I'll send you some videos, man. I just posted one on my timeline of showing
Yeah,
animals.
sure, man.
I'll tag you where I posted it. But it's like it's the relationship that we should be having with animals, and it's showing just how lovable and affectionate they can be. And it's just tragic, man. It's just so tragic that we oppress and dominate and exploit some animals. Thousands of them get surgery to save them. Well, oh my god, I can't lose my baby, like my dog or cat. We just like have decided arbitrarily these animals deserve love and respect, and these are the animals that we eat and kill, that we enslave. It just, they all suffer the same. They all have the same capacity for thoughts and feelings and emotions and relationships, and they're all highly social animals, man. It's a travesty. So
Yep.
anyway,
Yeah.
thanks for the opportunity. If you want to say anything else, go ahead and wrap it up, and I'll be quiet.
Yeah. Okay. Well, anyway, thanks anybody who listened to this. This wasn't like our usual hangouts per se. It's more like we're doing this for the benefit of vegan activists and that sort of thing, so that they won't waste time on all these silly excuses and get distracted, which is often what happens. And we're going to continue this in part 2. Or part 3, however many parts we need to do before we've covered all of the myths and logical fallacies. Anyway, I'm going to end the broadcast, and for now, goodbye, everybody.